past all of them as well. What a move to the 48. Oh, look at this, and onto the straight they come.
Brilliant move there from the number 40 to make it through. That left-hander sliding up the inside, going up now over Hawthorne Hill, down Pilgrim's Drop, and it's brilliant stuff here at Brands Hatch.
Hello everybody and welcome to the second round of the Asetek SimSports GT Challenge here from Snetterton. We've taken the trip over from the Midlands where we started our season at Silverstone, now over to the east and to the Snetterton circuit for the second of 4 90-minute rounds that we're going to have for our GT3 and GT4 machinery here this season. Hello everybody, welcome to RaceSpotTV. My name is Ewan Leary. Peter Mackay is alongside me for this round of the championship and all ones after it too. Still a long way to go in this championship season, Peter, but we've already had the iconic British circuit Silverstone just a couple of weeks ago. Now time for a different challenge over in the east. We'll be joining up with Peter Mackay when we can in a few moments' time. He'll be alongside me for the duration of tonight's racing. Let's take a look at where we'll be going over the course of this championship season, because as I mentioned, we've already had our first hour and a half. That took place a couple of weeks ago at Silverstone. It's time now for Snetterton. Our only overseas trip will be in 2 weeks' time after Easter at Spa, and then it will be Brands Hatch at the end of April to round off our season. To give you a rundown as the prizes as well, in all classes, the winner gets a 1 hour session in the base performance simulator GT Sim and the random selection draw, that's for any driver who completes more than 50% of all of the races this season, is into the draw for the La Prima Sim Racing pedals. The driver with the most points out of any of the 4 championships will get the La Prima direct drive wheelbase with quick release adapter as well. So plenty of prizes on offer and to join up with at the end of the season. Let's take a look at who got off to the best start at Silverstone, and it was Gal Valero as far as the GT3 pros are concerned. He beat Remy Gilbert, although it was a close race between them for a little while. Philip Ansel finished third ahead of Jack Southfield, and then Luciano Vitvert, who was inside the top 5 on a sim he's not particularly known for compared to others. George Streetley was 6th on the day ahead of Keith Stewart. Then it was Lee King McGee, who we saw racing last night on RaceSpotTV if you were with us, Jordan Pierce in 9th, and Mike Barber, who rounded out the top 10 in GT3 Pro. But by the time you were getting down to that end of the order, it was getting up to the front of the GT3 AMs. Gianluca Elia was the winner on that day. Adam Locke was second ahead of Adam Grevson. Nuno Costa, Marco Silva had a fairly eventful days in the midfield. They were inside the top 5 though, ahead of Tom Weston, Alistair Leckie as well, Stephen Hobb, Nick Dealey and Dan Ciotti in 10th place. As far as the GT4s go, it was Kieran Sharp who took the pro honours. Daniel Thomas was second ahead of Richard Simner. Then it was Mike Mollard and Richard Jepp. Jonas Yanham and Stuart Bickley were the final drivers to score points. Matthew Crisp, Daniel Makhmatov and Joe Newman missed out. And then in the GT4 AMs, it's worth bearing in mind that these fields are slightly smaller than the GT3s. Oliver Ettridge was able to win the opening round ahead of Nathan Tugg. Then Matt Cheverton in third ahead of Lewis Clark and Charles Wimbley round out the top 5. Alistair Pollock was 6th ahead of the South African Stephen Koenig. Carl Chase was ahead of Janeman Preuss, and James Smagersgale was the rounding out the top 10. So happy to have you with us on RaceSpotTV this afternoon. I'm Ewan O'Leary. Peter Mackay will be alongside me for this round of the championship. Good to have you with me for this one, Peter. Snetterton is an interesting circuit, and I've got to say, not everyone's favourite by any means. A very flat round here, but does provide a technical challenge, and it has squeezed in a good racetrack into what is a relatively small amount of space if you're looking at the facility as a whole. But a good racetrack and a great British racetrack to take on round 2 of our championship.
I think it's a stalwart of British motorsport is Snetterton, and has a huge amount of heritage behind it, and a lot of very successful race cars were developed here. The the Lotuses that went to Indianapolis and won in the 1960s, the BMW V12 LMR, remember that, developed by Williams, and the Bentley Speed 8 as well, and so many others. But great racing, and as you said, a technical challenge, particularly in the middle part of the circuit when you're going through the tight hairpin of Agostini, Hamilton, Augies, and then around Williams. It's a really, really tricky part of the circuit where you can give away a lot of time.
Yeah, and we'll be enjoying the challenges of Snetterton over the course of tonight. Of course, qualifying has just been completed, by the way. 36 drivers were able to set times there, with another John McClune not actually taking part there, so we'll see if he gets onto the grid. But let's talk about the ones that are there as we get onto the gridding phase for the second round of our championship. And I've got to say, it's maybe a little bit of a surprise at the very top of the standings in the overall anyway, because despite running away with it at Silverstone, Valero is not on pole. Here at Snetterton, it's Remy Gilbert, his adversary from 2 weeks ago, who is on pole ahead of Luciano Wittbert, and there's a half a second gap there too. Valero is third though, ahead of Ryan Ward. Then it's Keith Stewart and Anthony Castles to round out the third row. At seventh place will be George Streetley, then the first of the AMs, that's Gianluca Elia, ahead of Jack Southfield and Tom Weston, who round out the top 10. Mike Barber and Nathaniel Simpson round out an all-pro row 6. And Adam Locke, who's in the AMs, who qualified third there, and then Jordan Pierce. Adam Grevson leads a whole train of AMs, and in fact the rest of them all are. Nick Dealey is next. Then Marco Silva, Alistair Leckie, Nuno Costa, Nick Scott and Dan Ciotti to round out the 21 GT3s. And now onto the 15 GT4, starting with the pro Daniel Thomas and the AM Oliver Ettridge on the front row, which is a remarkable story in GT4. Matthew Crisp is third in pro, followed by fellow pro Kieran Schott. Then Nathan Tigers in the top 5 as an AM2. He's alongside Richard Simner. Then it's Richard Jepp in 7th, and Mikey Pollard. Carl Chase is third in AM, down in 9th, ahead of Matt Cheverton. Then it's Alistair Pollock and Louis Hesketh to round out the next couple of rows. Andy Chell and James Smaggersgale are next, along with Stephen Koenig, and then John McClune, who, as I mentioned, didn't set a time, but he will be on the back row there with Stephen Koenig to round out the 8 rows of GT4s. It's a nice mix that we've got. GT3 and GT4 racing does always mix well. I feel like it mixes especially well in Great Britain, of course, where we do have the famous racing series that does utilise these two manufacturers of cars, and these two classes should run well as a multi-class package around this circuit.
I think they will, and there's going to be big parts of the circuit where actually they make their lap time up in very similar ways. When you get to the very technical parts and the slower parts of the circuit where the GT3 cars can't use their more advanced aerodynamic grip, then we should see them all around the same pace. However, when you're going through the very fast corners, that's where the GT3s are really going to have to be clever on how they get past the GT4 machinery.
Yep. Let's see as we get up towards the line and get ourselves ready for round 2 of the championship. Lights are on for another hour and a half, and we are underway. It's a great start from the pole sitter and a real mess in the midfield, actually, as there was wheel-to-wheel contact over the line for the very first time. Into turn 1 they'll go, and it looks to be single file at the front. It's Valero making the move. Luciano Wittbert has been displaced immediately. He'll get down the inside, and there's contact. It was very close to contact if there wasn't, and there's a flash of the lights from Wittbert as well to show his displeasure. Meanwhile, in the GT4, we've got Daniel Thomas leading the way ahead of Matthew Crisp. It's pros in 1 and 2. The AM leader Oliver Ettridge has been bumped back to 3rd place in the second category.
It always gets a little bit tangled up there on the first lap at the Montreal hairpin. Just got to try and get through there clean. It's an hour and a half race. It's a long race, so you don't want to be getting turned around on the first lap. It's a big slide there from the Audi R8 further back in the pack. But we managed to get through that first part of the lap, but it's always treacherous without any major casualties, which is always good.
It is. An all 37 get away. Well, I was going to say without spinning, but I was starting that sentence too soon. Louis Hesketh seems to have gone around on the opening lap, but that seems to be it. Here's what it looks like in the midfield for the GT3s as they finally sort themselves out. to what was quite a lively start, especially back here. There was wheel-to-wheel and door-to-door contact as they crossed the line for the very first time. Now they go under the bridge and into the very tricky braking zone at Brundle, and then the right-hander at Nelson, and then they'll head themselves around the final couple of corners. First bomb hole, then Coram, to keep yourself to the right-hand side as much as possible. Open out Murray's corner and split yourself out onto the centre straight for the end of the opening lap. But it looks like it's been a very good start for the pole sitter at Remy Gilbert, and it looks like we've got a 1 and a bit second margin actually up there. Daniel Thomas can't be afforded the same luxury, but both pole sitters have converted well and taken control of this race early on.
So a good spread of manufacturers there fighting at the front of GT4. A couple of Mercedes, Porsche, Aston Martin in it there as well. All have their own different attributes and how they deliver their lap time. Mercedes, a very strong car, very stable car, quick in a straight line. The Porsche, maybe not quite got the straight line performance, but very good under braking. That is less than ideal. Marco Silva ending up hard in the wall, and yeah, you really don't want to see that on the opening lap.
And that was live bodywork in the grass, wasn't it? I could have sworn I saw some body. Oh, and there's someone off here down the hairpin. There is all kinds of carnage, I'm afraid, going off here. Oh, and contact. Oh, the teammates. Jordan Pierce is one of them, who's gone clattering into one of his teammates, Agostini, on the exit of it anyway. And that's a complete catastrophe. Adam Locke is the one who goes wide initially, or part of the story here. He just seemingly can't turn at all. Don't know what that's all about. He's going to rejoin without too many problems, but what has... Oh dear, and one of the Ferraris joins him as well. What has been going on here in GT3 after a great opening lap? It's all descended into a bit of chaos on the second.
That was very messy, wasn't it? And the two Ferraris coming a major cropper there, that new 296 GT3 Ferrari, and already seeing a bit of multi-class traffic. Of course, that's one of the delayed Ferraris trying to get back up to speed again and cut through the GT4 field. Now this corner coming up here through the bomb hole and then to Coram, this is where the difference between a GT4 and a GT3 car is quite profound. The corner speed that a GT3 car can carry is a lot bigger.
Yeah, and we're getting a written example of, or a visual example I should say, of that right now in the back of the field as some of those GT3s try and find their way through. On board with Nick Dealey, who's used to being a race engineer for teams down the years, trying his hand at driving. Wasn't so bad at Silverstone at all, and is very much embroiled in the battles down here at the lower end of the top 10. Or sorry, just outside of the top 10, the lower end of the GT3 order. There's more sliding, more moving down the field, I'm afraid. This time for Nuno Costa, who slides his way around Palmer and slides himself into the grass slightly there, but thankfully he's avoided the wall and he's got on with it. But what a remarkably chaotic start it's been. Nearly 20 seconds covering this battle from the front of the field already, which is pretty remarkable. Same can't be said in GT4. There's a real contrast in the way that these two classes have started their races.
It's all very neat and tidy in GT4, isn't it? As they all get into a very nice rhythm earlier on. As Richard Simner in the 42 DCW Racing Porsche GT4 trying to put pressure on the Aston Martin V Vantage, the 99 of Kieran Sharp, both running in the Pro class, and Oliver Ettridge in the AM class in GT4, second overall. Magnificent. Yeah,
really good to start with. Then we continue to follow under the bridge. Slight clipping of the grass there actually for Oliver Ettridge, the GT4 AM leader. It's ahead of Nathan Tugg, who's under pressure actually. Richard Jepp alongside, and that could be a changing of places as well. And while that doesn't matter for points necessarily, they score points differently, Pro and Am, but you do need the track position, and you'll want the track position too to get near to your rivals, especially if you're chasing Oliver Ettridge, which is proving to be a tricky task at the moment. Nathan Tugg in a Pro sandwich right now. Mikey Pollard the one following, and Richard Jepp now the one ahead, having muscled his way through on the exit of Nelson there. So a pass made amongst the Porsche Caymans here, and Jepp is up to the top 5 positions. But as I say, this is only helping Ettridge, who now has 3 cars between himself and his nearest rival.
So 7 minutes into this race, very neat and tidy in GT4. Maybe not quite as much, as particularly at the back in GT3 as Marco Silva. Well, nothing wrong with the durability of that Mercedes, because he's, despite going hard into the wall, he's actually looking not too bad there, and by my reckoning, hasn't had to come into the pits to get repairs. So he really got away with that one on the opening lap.
I'm not sure how. I mean, if we hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have commented on the car at all in terms of damage. I mean, maybe from that angle it looks like it's a bit pushed in, but I mean, there's barely any obvious signs that he's been in the wall there, but he has at about 100 miles an hour. So I've no idea how he's quite got away with that so well, but fair play to him, and he's going to have to make use of that now that he's been dealt a good hand, let's say, with the contact in the wall there. And he's got to make use of it now. But look at that, there's no damage, obvious damage at all, and it's clearly not affecting him internally either. He's just getting on with this. But in terms of the incident itself, it was a bit bizarre. It was in a straight line, of course, and that was the contact I was commenting on as they crossed the line for the first time. Now, I didn't think it ended up with someone in the wall, but it was bizarre to see wheel-to-wheel and door-to-door stuff before we'd even really taken the green flag, or as it was beginning to wave.
Yeah, then we shouldn't really see that before you've even reached the first corner. It's a little bit silly. Although we did see it in the IndyCar series at the weekend with the Thermal Club $1 Million Challenge, where they were banging into each other on the start-finish straight. So even the best of them are at it.
Yeah, it does happen. Not unusual. Still with these guys for 11th position, and the gap's only increasing to those up front. In terms of who's in which class, well, Nathaniel Simpson is the only one in this group in a pro car. Now, this was a bit of a theme of the Silverstone race. Some of the pro battles getting in amongst the AM drivers, and that's no problem because, as I say, they don't score points from the same system. However, it does mean that there's some awkward moments where you're trying to get through on someone or trying not to get passed by another, and so on and so on. Makes life very difficult for everybody here. And there's even defending going on here for Nick Scott down there towards Brundle. He's put himself off, I think. Goes slightly wide through Nelson. He'll recover and keep 11th position ahead of Nick Dealey. But this is a real awkward position for Nathaniel Simpson here, and not an easy hole to dig yourself out of, not least with the overtakes, but the seconds that he'll have to make up afterwards as well. It already mounting up after only 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's a long way to go to try and fight back 80 minutes of running left on the clock as we ride with Adam Grevson in the Audi R8 LMS GT3 Evo 2. It just rolls off the tongue. But although it's been in competition for a couple of years, it's fairly new to the iRacing platform. Certainly one of the most sonorous cars on the grid.
When are we going to get traffic then, you wonder? It's not quite as profound, the difference between these two classes, as it is in some categories around the world, where some of the or the top class versus the bottom is quite a large difference as Sharp gets through on Ettridge there. It's not profound, really. Only 5 or 6, maybe 7 seconds between the GT3s and the GT4s here. I'm talking about the sort of the back end of the GT3s, who are mostly in the 48s, and the front end of the GT4s, which can see you into the 154s around here. That's going to take you a little while to catch up, and we did see this at Silverstone as well. But I think the traffic could be a little bit more key around this circuit than it was at Silverstone. It's a bit narrower. It's, I don't think, lacking in overtaking opportunities and passing places, especially for multi-class traffic, but it just doesn't have quite the wideness and the movability maybe of a Silverstone and Spa, of course, which is coming up in 2 weeks, where they'll have that similar manoeuvrability that you don't get around here or at the final race of the season.
It's going to be tricky. Yeah, going to be very tricky for the drivers to negotiate. And of course, it will mix up when each class goes for their pit stops. Is a little attempt there for Matthew Chris to make a move, and he's just got in a little bit too deep in it to Oggies and ran. I've actually put a couple of wheels on the grass there, lost a couple of positions. You have to get on with it and get back up to speed. That'll be frustrating.
He will. At least he's not too far away, I suppose, in a relatively clean GT4 field so far. 4 pit stops so far, in fact 5 already. We've already got Anthony Cassels maybe out the race from GT3. In terms of other GT3s who have pitted, Alistair Leckie has been in. It was only for a moment. He didn't use a fast repair either, so he's at the back of the field and already a lap down, as is John McClune and Adam Locke. They've both used their fast repairs. You can understand probably what and how their pit stops looked. But in GT4, Andy Chell had to go and do it in GT4 AMS. And all the GT4 pros have been into the pit lane yet, but we have seen one from the AMS and so far quite a few pit stops, unfortunately, at the back of the field, but maybe not as many as you could have feared at the start of the day, as some of these GT3s, who are just hanging back a little bit and struggling early on, having to find their way through the GT4 leaders. There goes one of the Porsches through on the Aston Martin of Kieran Sharp there, out towards the end of the straight towards Agostini's. Big braking zone down there, of course, and a good opportunity for those GT3s to get down the inside. And Jordan Pierce, that is, who's working his way through, having made his pit stop, of course. No surprises to see that he's used his fast repair, because that was a big hit that we saw him have down at that very hairpin a few laps ago.
Have to keep his nose nice and clean over the next 77 minutes or so, because he's without that fast repair, if he does take any more damage, it'll be a lengthy delay in the pits. And I suspect as well that will mean having to pit early will mean an extra pit stop too, which is all you're always giving away quite a lot of times. Not that long a pit lane here at Snetterton, but still a penalty nonetheless. I tell you where you really don't want to take an extra pit stop is when we go to Spa. That is the biggest penalty you can imagine. Yeah, that's the real hurtful one. So they'll be getting them out of the way for this round to avoid them next, you would imagine. We'll be with you again in a couple of weeks' time on RaceSpotTV, as always, for those last 2 rounds. Fortnightly series, this one, for the duration of the 4 rounds, as we've got Nathaniel Simpson off the road. I think he was recovering from, well, if he wasn't off the road, then he was certainly being overtaken down there at the hairpin, because Adam Grevson is through. And for a pro driver to be slipping in a field of AMS, it's not what you want particularly. Marco Silva's right there now too, and Nathaniel Simpson will not be pleased with how this race has gone so far for the first 15 minutes. This, by the way, by far the biggest group that we have actually out there on the circuit. It's not quite the same for everybody else around the field. It's mainly 1 or 2 car battles. There's a 3-car battle for 5th place, for example, involving all pro drivers, but none as big as this one. But it's getting quite painful for Nathaniel Simpson now. All of a sudden, doesn't really look like he has the pace quite of those around him. No, it looks to be maybe holding up the 83 of Marco Silva. They're pace-wise, ultimate pace-wise, Silva has about 3/10 in hand on their fastest lap so far. But remember, these 2 cars, they make their lap time in different ways. And interestingly there, you'd expect the Mercedes to maybe pull a few meters on the Porsche, but although the damage isn't quite as, we don't see any visible damage on that 83 Mercedes of Marco Silva, there could be stuff underneath which is curtailing the straight line speed. Yeah, it could be actually. That's a good point, because you see him have that big hit on the front straight not so long ago, and is that just playing into a role at the moment? That's quite wide for the Mercedes at Palmer, and there'll be no chance into Agostini here on this occasion. How far are we away from lap traffic at the moment? Well, still quite far. James Smagersgale is off the back of the main field in GT4, but he's quite a long way off. So while they'll be catching him relatively soon, it's still quite a while and quite a wait until the rest of them, which means and begins to make you wonder, how is this going to change? Because Remy Gilbert, who's currently leading the race, is 1.5 seconds ahead of Gaio Valero, but it doesn't seem to be really changing. 1.5 seconds, it goes up to 2 with a bit of lap traffic there, but that's what I mean. They're all in 1s at the moment, the GT4s. Surely this is going to struggle to really change until we see the big first run through, which is not imminent, but not too far away. Well, I think that's when you really will see the pack being shuffled. when the GT3s and the GT4s start to kind of coexist. Although some of the cars, they look fairly similar. If you look at, say, the Mercedes, for example, you look at it, you think, okay, you can see that they're based on the same car, but the differences are enormous. In general terms, the GT4 car, it runs with about 80% parts from the base road car and about 20% pure race parts. The GT3 is kind of right around the other way. It's about 80% pure race parts, 20% road. It must be based on the basic design of the road-going car, but that's kind of where the similarities stop. When you take for example, you know, a 911 base Carrera 911, and you plonk it beside the 992 GT3R, they look quite different. Yeah.
2 laps I think we are away, by the way, because James Smagasgale was just overtaken there. That was the lap traffic. We were just watching those 2 leaders go through, so we're about a couple of laps away from these guys. We're on board with Alistair Pollock, as you can see. That's Carl Chase just up in front, inside the top 10. It's an AM battle for the 4th position. You can just see Matt Cheverton in the darker liveried car just up ahead in the Aston Martin. That is the podium place, the final of the podium places in this class. But there's the interruption straight away. One of the Audis down the inside there in GT3. That's Alistair Leckie, who is actually a lap down on these guys and unlapping himself from them. There's a lot of loose GT3s around from incidents early on in this race, and there's another one of them in the Lamborghini there. That is the leader, Remy Gilbert. So, oh dear, that was up on the curb, and that could have been trouble. So Gilbert is in the traffic now, and this could change the race here. This is a very important moment for those GT3 leaders, as that was a bomb down the inside from Nuno Costa, or Marco Silva, excuse me, on Nathaniel Simpson, who is now through.
Great move just to get that on the brakes there into Murray's coming out of Coram. That's a really well set up move. Not easy to pull off, but managed to get it done. And now will we see this 83 Mercedes pull away from the 911 of Nathaniel Simpson? Meanwhile, just up ahead, we've got a proper punch-up going on here, being led by the 25 Porsche of Nick Scott, Nick Dealey in there as well, and Adam Grevson's Audi making it a 3-way tussle.
It is. They all go very wide out that 3rd corner, don't they, through Palmer, using all of the AstroTurf, not necessarily staying 2 wheels within the white lines at all times, but it seems to be okay with everybody, so they're all running that line, and that's the way that they're racing this one. But that seems to be an isolated incident around here. It's not one of those circuits where track limits are a particular point of discussion. This circuit's still lined by grass on either side for the most part, which is a good thing, although maybe not quite there. I mean, well, the grass is there, but it does allow you to extend quite a little bit with the AstroTurf as well, and maybe that was a little bit wider than advisable, and a bit of a mistake from Adam Grevson as we were riding on board with him there. Yeah,
and lost a few car lengths coming down the Bentley Straight as they hit GT4 traffic around one of the McLaren 570Ss, and you mentioned the narrow nature of this circuit, Ewan, you're absolutely spot on. It really doesn't give you many options, unlike something like a Silverstone or even a Spa, of where you can just go straight around the outside of somebody. Here, you've got to be a lot more precise in traffic if you're in one of the GT3s, and if you're in one of the GT4s, well, all you can do is just hold your line and kind of hope for the best.
Yeah. Over the line to complete another lap after 20 minutes now. That's 12 laps in the books. 11 laps in the books. And we've got it off just up in front of us. One of the Aston Martin GT4s has come into contact, I'm afraid, with Nick Dealey, who we were just watching through the windscreen there of Adam Grevson's Audi. Not sure which of the GT4s that was, but it was certainly in contact with Nick Dealey in the GT3. And there's your danger of lap traffic again. Nick Dealey will skip past this Mercedes with a little bit more ease on this occasion. But turn 1 is a fast corner, and that's the danger. Now down the inside goes Grevson, and he goes around. It was a dive at Agostini from him, and he's the one who pays the price, spinning around and losing quite a few places.
Well, that Audi R8 is really a knife-edge machine sometimes, and it just caught him out there as, brother, Andy Schell. Difficult one there, was just kind of going around his line, and There was just no room for the GT3s to come round. They still went for it anyway, and oh, what a mess. What a mess. I think, Ewan, this is going to be the story of the race. It's so tricky and technical in places, trying to get through if you're in a string of GT3 cars past the lone GT4. It's really not easy.
Well, yeah, I agree, but I wonder whether this is going to be something isolated to the first run-through traffic, or at least not isolated, but made worse by the fact that it's the first run-through, or whether this will persist. We'll see over the next hour and a bit, of course. But, I mean, it's such a... You said it at the time, it's sort of one of those knife-edge incidents, almost, where it's the GT4 in parts responsibility to facilitate an overtake of a GT3, although they don't have to jump out of the way. They do at least have to make things not difficult and not unpredictable for the GT3 drivers, who also have to be respectful if they're the ones making the pass on that occasion. And turn 1 is one of those instances where the GT3s can go faster than the GT4s in a flat-out race, and they can adjust their lines a little bit more readily as well than those GT4s. And on that occasion, it seemed that Andy Schell and the GT4 Aston Martin's lack of ability to change the line through the middle of the corner there was eventually his downfall. Can we put the blame onto Nick Dealey for putting his car on the outside there, or put it down to one of those racing incidents, or one of those that the GT4 has to take some responsibility for? It's a difficult one to call.
Who would want to be a race steward, especially in a multi-class championship? Yeah, it's tricky, and I think it's actually important, particularly in the sim racing world, where you can test out cars easily. I mean, you can't really do that in the outdoor world. So I think in iRacing, you know, there's nothing to stop you jumping into a GT. If you're a GT3 driver, jump into a GT4 car and have a few laps with it and see where they make up their lap time, and indeed where they don't make up lap time. And that's, if you understand that and what they're dealing with, then you've got much more understanding when you're trying to get around them in your GT3 machines. So there's definitely a little bit of misunderstanding so far.
Yeah, that's always bound to happen, unfortunately, as we go on board again with Nathaniel Simpson here, round the very long right-hander of Coram, and then into Murray's, where you need to get it slowed up in time to really benefit from the exit here. This is a really important corner in terms of your run onto the centre straight. I know the Bentley straight is almost equally as long, even though neither of them are particularly long straights in the world of motorsport, but they are long in the context of this racetrack. But it feels like that exit at Murray's is where you can really lose and win a lot of time. Williams' corner onto the Bentley straight is a bit more of a flowing turn, where you're less likely to gain or lose quite so much time. While we've been focusing on these guys a little bit further down in GT3, Remy Gilbert has been able to pull out an even bigger margin now of nearly 5 seconds over Gal Valero, who was actually caught by Luciano Wittbert on that run through traffic there. Here they are. The orange Porsche is Wittbert, and it's the Apex Racing Lamborghini in front, the race 1 winner, under pressure all of a sudden after looking dominant 2 weeks ago.
So the bright orange number 15 there, Luciano Wittbert, trying to make his move here on Gael Valero in the Apex Racing Lamborghini. Tell you, that number 15 car looks just like the GP Elite Porsche that won at Mugello at the weekend. Very similar.
It's not going to be missed in terms of spotting Viva in the field. We're not going to miss him out in the bright orange livery. Of course, the Apex Racing team equally as identifiable in the world of sim racing. The black, white and light blue they've been running on their cars for many years now. I don't know if you particularly noticed this when you saw the entries for this one, Peter, or whether it was just me that found this a little bit odd, but it appears to me very often in sim racing that especially these big teams like the Apex Racing team, who are all over the place these days, don't often do these things in ones. They don't often get a driver in the series on their own one, unless it's for, you know, a special one-off thing, or it's a more minor series, I suppose. But for something like this, for Gal Valero to be on his own, when I saw it on the entry list, I've got to say I found it a little bit strange that he was just here on his own.
In general, you're absolutely right. That is unusual, because the reason for that is because the sim racing teams work together so closely on setup and practice together and really work on solutions. The word teammate really means what it what it spells out in sim racing. A little bit different to perhaps in Formula One, for example, where you want to absolutely demoralize your teammate because then you keep your job and they don't. It's kind of as simple as that, and you probably wouldn't be working very closely together on setup. Sim racing is completely different. You are genuinely right in there with your teammates. So to go into a series alone does make the preparation aspect a little bit more difficult.
Here's a bit of a new graphic we've had on RaceSpotTV in the last few weeks, newish. It shows and details, especially on that last lap, showing that Luciano Vitvert gained 1.1 seconds in 2 laps. Now, I'm not sure how much credit for those 1.1 seconds we can give to traffic, but maybe a little bit. I think what we're more seeing, though, and we still are seeing with these last 3 laps, is that it's all well and good cruising up to the back of someone, but passing is something very, very different. And it seems that Vitvert is being held at that sort of 4 to 5 tenths of a second gap, where he's just slightly frustratingly too far back to try and action a move.
And this is perhaps one of the slight downsides that has been found with GT3 machinery, is you do get that little bit of aero wash where there's more, as the cars increase in their aerodynamic performance, you get more turbulent air that comes out the back, and that makes it difficult for the car following to get close. These cars, they make their downforce from the stuff on top of the car rather than underneath, like you would maybe get more likely in a prototype racing car, or a single seater for that matter. So you've got it's really, really tricky with a GT3 car, particularly apparently if you follow for example the Mercedes, is where you get a horrible amount of push. It can depend on which car you're following.
Good evening to everyone in YouTube, by the way, and somebody making a good point that this series is fixed setup, so they're not.
Yeah.
So Gal Valero wouldn't be working on setups with other people in his team. However, I still think that the point stands, to be honest, Peter, that working together in a team doesn't just limit yourself to setups, and it's still odd, even in a fixed series, to see him on his own.
Well, the preparation aspect is okay if you can't change the setup. It could be about lines, braking points, what gear are you using in a certain corner, even just having company in the practice, because it can be long, lonely practice sessions to race at this level and at this speed. So it definitely is. That is the preparation aspect. When you look at the competition element, really, it never hurts to have allies out there rather than enemies.
Exactly, and. So far, he's not run up into that problem, but it is still odd. So there we go. We're riding on board with Luciano Vitvert and following him, and as he tries to close in on Gal Valero. We're nearly half an hour through this hour-and-a-half race, and one thing that's extremely noticeable about this series, of course, the fact that it's fixed setup, that also means that we can limit the fuel, and we do limit the fuel in that first stint, so these pit stops do come round earlier than you expect to see them, and then they'll be running to the end from here, you would imagine. Makes it slightly awkward, because if this was a normal series where they could do what they like, you might be tempted to maybe pit at 45 minutes and split the race in half, maybe go for an hour and put half a tank in at the end, but you don't really get that choice, and you get a very awkward first half an hour and then a longer second stint of an hour, just making these drivers think a little bit and keeping them on their toes compared to just letting them have the free rein that they would otherwise get.
Yeah, just like you say, it gives two very distinctly different stints to think about for our driver. So pit stops underway. Nathaniel Simpson gasses back up the Porsche out of the pits. Not a nice place to rejoin there for coming out the pits at probably the fastest corner on the circuit. No,
was doing a race at Road Atlanta yesterday where there was a couple of incidents on the exit of pit lane. I hope that we don't see similar tonight at Snetterton, because it's even worse here, you could argue. Into the pit lane for Luciano Vitvert, Gal Valero, Ryan Ward, Keith Stewart, Jack Southfield. They're all in a line there. You can all see them on your screen as they all pull to a stop. In fact, Remy Gilbert is one of the only to actually be out there still. Now, is Valero's stop going to be short enough to allow him ahead of Luciano Vitvert here? Well, Tom Weston will go through on all of them. He'll be another one of the few drivers to get through another lap before having to make a pit stop. That's 17 complete for the guys on pit lane at the moment. You'd imagine if the guys still out there do any more than 18, it would be impressive. There goes Valero. When is Wittbert going to get going? That is an obvious gap of 2.9 seconds that is going to take a lot of closing from Luciano Wittbert.
Interesting. You would think that the car behind would need less time at the fuel pump, but clearly not. Clearly, Gael Valero has been very economical in that Lamborghini Huracan GT3, but the most frugal is our race leader, Remy Gilbert. Not only has he had a blistering pace at the front of the field in the 154 Lamborghini, he's been able to run it a little bit longer. Is it a Lamborghini trait with that normally aspirated engine? Is it a little bit more frugal? No, frugal and Lamborghini are not two words you use in the same sentence very often.
No, or any word associated with it. No, there is Remy Gilbert.
No, not that either.
Yeah, exactly. Remy Gilbert into the pit lane then, and that's no surprise. That's 18 laps complete for him. Now, let's just check the other pit stop time. Ryan Ward needed 42 seconds. He's in a Lamborghini. Mark Barber did as well. Gianluca Elliott did a shorter stop in a Porsche. So did George Streetley. I reckon this is maybe driver differences at the moment, although we'll get more answers once this pit stop is complete. It's nearly a full service because don't forget these guys are effectively running a tank dry here. I know we've only been racing for 33 minutes, but as I mentioned earlier, their fixed setups mean that they have a smaller amount of fuel to start this race than you would otherwise do, which of course you would start with a full tank. They only get to start with about half, and that means a full service is pretty much required. Up to 40 seconds goes Remy Gilbert, and out of pit lane he'll go. Gael Valero did actually have a shorter pit stop, but it's nowhere near short enough to see him in the lead.
No, the gap is, trimmed a touch, but not by a huge amount. So Remy Gilbert in the driver's seat now with 56 minutes left on the clock. A full stint, full tank of fuel. The car will feel quite different than it did even at the start of the race, let alone in the laps before coming into the pits. But he'll have prepared for that. He'll know exactly what to expect. Also, this Lamborghini Huracan GT3 is now one of the most long-standing cars on the iRacing platform. You look at the Porsche, for example, the 992 GT3R, been around for less than a year. So there's definitely, the drivers that have gone for the Lamborghini Huracan, there's a lot of mileage they'll have had in those cars, and they'll know its characteristics well.
Yeah, we have most familiarity with most of the cars in this series by now. Oh dear, that was close. A very close blend on the exit of pit lane in GT4, where we've run a little bit longer, and that was the AM battle we've been following for a lot of the day, at least the top of the AM battle, and it's not going to end just as we exit the pit lane. Matthew Crisp is going to want to get through here on the outside line of Richard Simner. It's a long way round at turn 2, and Simner was always going to hold on to that place in 6th position. So what you're seeing right now is Oliver Ettridge ahead of Richard Jep, then it's Richard Simner and Matthew Crisp, but the notable thing here is Oliver Ettridge's pit stop time. 55.5 seconds is a good 5 seconds longer than pretty much everybody else.
That is a lot extra. You need to be really, really heavy-footed to be that much longer in the pits. That's a strange one there. Could it be something tyres-wise? Because the GT4s will take longer to change their tyres.
I'm at a loss for reasons, to be honest with you. I really don't know. But what I do know is that it could lose him a lead. Carl Chase, it was, just Carl Chase, who's actually still out there, was not too far away. Although Nathan Tugg, I would have thought would be closer. Although his pit stop was 54 seconds. Who else has done shorter stops? Well, for whatever reason, the AM drivers are doing slightly longer stops, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense because they're on the same category after all. There's no difference other than that. So it's not making a lot of sense to me at the moment, to be honest. I think Ettridge will still be the leader, but he's just got a lot more cars behind him in the immediate proximity now. He's still got a healthy lead, though. He's got about 10 seconds, I think, on Nathan Tugg now.
So 53 minutes to go pit stop, last of the pit stops happening now. 91, Carl Chase, just in the GT4 category. Now a sprint to the line, and at the front of the field, Remy Gilbert's lead has been trimmed a touch. Gael Valero is on a good run here. We haven't had a complete full lap yet from Gilbert to get a comparison, but the gap has definitely come down, so Valero is on the charge.
He is, and this is what happened 1 week ago, or 2 weeks ago as well, at the first round at Silverstone. It was a close battle between Gilbert and Valero throughout that first half an hour. They both came into the pit lane. Valero was out in front, but although he was anyway, but there was one moment in traffic where he got a second's worth of margin, and then that margin just kept increasing and increasing. And in the end, if you look at the result sheet, you wouldn't think it was a very close race. But there was a good battle between them, and it did have a degree of uncertainty about it, as this is a real mess. What has gone on here between these two? And that is the icing on the cake, I'm afraid, for Nick Scott, who's into the wall, I can guess, for a second time here. He's got no front bumper. He's reversing back onto the track, into the path of one of the Mercedes. Goodness me, that was all a big mess. It was Marco Silva, I think, in the Mercedes, the bright blue, and those two have been at it, I think, for more than what we've just seen.
Well, that might go down at the end of season awards as the longest accident of the season. Just seemed to go on and on and on there. Oh dear, dear. And if you've used up the fast repair already, you're going to be in big trouble, and that's just so unnecessary. The crowd needs to have
right
out. Oh my word.
Oh goodness me.
And then there was a little bit of, would you say, karma here?
Oh, he's not reversing, I suppose, but he's just not braking.
There's the proof.
There you go. Nick Scott backing himself back onto the road again, and that's more contact. But as I say, we joined them both with no front bumper, so you'd imagine something happened before that.
Possibly, yes, quite possibly. You know, look at this. You've got to give the cards width. There it goes, closes it off.
Yeah, there's a few attempts there to turn left, maybe a bit early.
Yeah, that's really not on. And what you have to say is, if this was done on purpose, you almost have to commend the skill, but I doubt that was on purpose. It's the cruel twist of fate.
Well, first of all, I think Marco Silva could have avoided that, really. But because you could see that coming, although I guess in our replays we know what's about to happen because we've already seen it once. But nevertheless, surely you'd be able to steer it or just brake out of that one.
If I reiterate, I think the initial one was quite on purpose.
Oh yeah.
That what was going on down the Bentley Straight, that is disgraceful. Really not what we'd like to see. So yeah, it's worth clarifying that. Not the least thing to see. Yeah,
although I don't think either of them cover themselves in glory there, I'm afraid.
No.
Nick Scott was very much squeezing Marco Silva, but not necessarily out of the limits of his abilities, in terms of you are allowed to give exactly one car width and you don't have to give any more, per se, the rules, I suppose. But Marco Silva did then turn left. Nick Scott was in the wall, came back across the road, and as we say, I reckon there's some previous to that one, because there were no front bumpers on either of the cars there. So I'd imagine both of them will be getting a visit from the stewards if they haven't had one already. And interestingly, Nick Scott has taken his fast repair and continues on, although I think Nick Silva may decide to become our third retirement of the day. The one we haven't spoken about so far, by the way, was from John McClune, who hasn't actually had very much time to practice this week, as he mentioned in the Discord earlier today. It's been unfortunately busy this week with other matters and hasn't had much chance to practice this circuit. A difficult one to come into with very little pre-warning. Didn't qualify as a result. Decided to start from the back of the GT3s, but has now parked it, unfortunately. So hopefully we'll see him back at Spa again for round 3. Back to the GT4s, where it's not over here. The battle for second place is the most interesting part of all of this. Kieran Sharp is leading the way in GT4, and maybe we can put that partly down anyway to a shorter pit stop. 49 seconds from him, which is the shortest by half a second at least.
So that's free time, isn't it? If you can cut down those pit stop times. Kieran Sharp in a very strong position in GT4. right now in his Aston Martin, and yeah, that covering that short pit stop. It's not the whole gap with that 11-second gap, but it certainly made a big dent into it.
It has. Into Brundle goes this group, including one of the Porsche GT3s, which hops over the curbs dramatically. That was Dantiotti there, the final driver on the lead lap, incidentally, in this race. Getting through on 2 GT4s on the straight and then getting passed by them in the corners. Now what's going to happen here for Matthew Crisp as he looks for his way down the inside? This is inventive. Here he goes at the final corner. Oh, well, he's been a bit rude there, I'm afraid, to Richard Simner. It was all looking very good, and I've got to say the idea was fantastic. The execution may be slightly off.
It was aggressive anyway, wasn't it? Just barged the big Mercedes through the gap that was left wide open. And yeah, Richard Simner clearly not happy, hitting the headlight flash of frustration button, and we'll try to fight back. Again, two quite different cars here. They have their different ways of making up their lap time, and yeah, Simner will be hoping to just try and get back on terms and try and get his own back a little cleanly, of course.
Yeah, let's hope so. But there was definitely a bit of anger out of the final corner there. There's no doubt about that, with the flashing of the lights. Although, would we expect to see anything else particularly? I would argue not, after seeing what we just did. Now, that could be interesting for Richard Jepp as he goes side by side on the way into Hamilton there with one of the GT3s. That's still Dantiotti trying to find his way through. This is what I was talking about earlier with the lack of difference between GT3 and GT4. Sometimes it can make it very tricky, especially in the sort of infield section of Snetterton, if you like, from the Montreal hairpin right the way round to Williams, which you've just gone through, and out onto the back straight here for the GT4 leaders. And as soon as they get through that, they've got the leaders to contend with. So that's Remy Gilbert alongside and through on Richard Simner, and that marks another round of traffic, although they don't really come in waves and rounds anymore, but in steady ones and twos.
It's like Noah's Ark, just high, even more expensive Noah's Ark.
Yeah, well, very expensive.
They were 2x2, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes. And Valero going to look to use that. Well, he's bringing that gap down, isn't he? Just over 3 seconds is that margin now, although he does have a bit of in-class lap traffic to contend with. That's never great news to see. It's Adam Locke who's just up ahead, and we'll be chasing down Dantiotti actually for that next position in AM, but maybe this will hold Valero up a little bit and stifle some of the progress he's made in recent laps.
It will, yeah, and you wonder if possibly that's what Remy Gilbert's had to deal with, just a few laps before, and it might well yo-yo back and forth. But on clean air, Valero's pace looks strong, and he can just about, I think he probably will just be about to see Remy Gilbert. Yes, he will, just going round the corner there, thinking, okay, right, I've got that view. I know I can do this, and I know I can get through the traffic that little bit quicker. I can catch him. But as soon as he hits this bit of traffic, the gap's from being down to just over 3 seconds, it's now up to nearly 4 already.
Yeah, Gilbert's done very well there. Skipped through the traffic excellently. And he's brought that gap back to 4 seconds, and Valero's not even done with the traffic yet. You'd expect, with the general concertina effect, to Gilbert to catch the traffic first, and then you get Valero just catching up a little bit, and then he extends away again as he works his way through the traffic. But look at the amount that he's got ahead of him here, Gal Valero. This is not helpful at all for his race. Oliver Ettridge, the latest of them in GT4. He's not going to get down the inside before Bomhol. They'll have to wait for Coram now. Coram, I should say. The right-hander, long way round here, of course, and he's still not dealt with the 2 GT3s, and maybe this is where some of the credit for the gap coming down should go as we get the 2 in front. Oh dear, well, that was all very odd. Dantiotti and Adam Locke there were in some sort of a fight. Locke was trying to get to the pit lane. I think Ciotti was trying to let everybody through on his left, but Adam Locke was looking for the pit lane on the right-hand side.
It's a bit awkward there, not only going out the pit lane, but going in too. So that's it is all a little bit tight and a little bit elbows out and argy-bargy here at Snetterton. Definitely not the same as the wide open confines of of Silverstone last time out. Both, of course, former World War II air bases of different varieties. They used to have a flying fortress fleet based here at Snetterton, just like what they had at Sebring, and they flew aid over to Holland during the war.
Oh wow, that's something I didn't know, but that's not surprising, I suppose. It's yeah, there's a couple of British racetracks that are built on those kind of old sites, and you can certainly notice as well, or at least if you didn't know beforehand, you can certainly tell, because I mean, just think in your head about how flat Silverstone and Snetterton are. There's a reason for that. It's not by accident. That's just what it's like around here, and of course flat surfaces, very good for airfields. So there you go. It all makes sense when you figure it out, or learn that kind of knowledge. It's a circuit that does have this kind of old charm to it in some ways. Snetterton. It's got a really sort of wide open grassy section on the outside of turn 1, where you can go for miles and miles without hitting anything, and for what used to be some sort of fields on the outside as well. It's got some sort of old school feel to it out there, I find, and the way that it's placed in the local area as well, sort of plonked right in the countryside, really. Although a lot of racetracks are, especially ones of this age. So there you go. But it's a great historic racetrack, and good that it's still on a lot of calendars these days. And as I was talking about at the top of the show, it's one of those circuits that kind of makes use of a small area-ish, because if you look at a map of Snetterton, it's very much sort of got the outline of it, most of which we're using here, but we're of course on the 300 layout, which also goes for the infield section at Palmer, Agostini, Hamilton and Oggies as well, just adding a few more corners into it, and making this a nearly 2-minute lap in a GT3 car, and proper Grand Prix style, or at least length, racetrack.
It is, and it's a real technical challenge. A lot of it redesigned by the circuit's owner, Jonathan Palmer, and the MSV group. In fact, the second corner, the Montreal or Wilson's hairpin, was actually Jonathan Palmer was sitting watching the Canadian Grand Prix at Montreal one Sunday afternoon and mapped out the radius of the corner from a hairpin there on Google Maps, and used that same radius for his hairpin.
That is quite remarkable. I've never really thought of that, because I would have thought, without having known that, I would have thought Snetterton's hairpin is tighter, but it can't be. It can't be, surely. I guess it's got to be the same.
I think it's exactly the same radius as the final hairpin at Montreal before that big long run up to the Wall of Champions chicane. There's a lot of real interesting tales around Snetterton. Of course, there's the bomb hole corner, which is it's a common misconception that was because it was an airbase, it had been bombed during the war. It hadn't. In fact, when they started racing here with motorcyclists, the motorcyclists really didn't like it, and they called it a bum hole of a corner. And then they thought that maybe wasn't quite for family audience, so they thought, we'll call it the bum hole.
We'll get commentators to say almost exactly the same thing anyway.
Yes,
that's what they thought.
Exactly. Yeah, it didn't work, did it? We're after.
So there we
go.
go.
No, we're not now after 9 o'clock. Oh dear.
Oh, not quite. We'll be there by the end of the race though, so we'll unleash at the end. Anyway, we'll avoid that subject maybe for another half an hour until that point. Still plenty going out on the circuit. As I mentioned earlier though, it's mostly two-car battles, and in fact this is the only one now in GT3 with all of the spreading out that the field has done over the last 50 minutes or so. It's Nathaniel Simpson who's still behind Nick Dealey, and still, I would argue, finding himself stuck horrifically in traffic. Compared to his speed, he seems to have been not really able to show it here today, and not really that that's been anybody's fault, but if he could have worked his way through the traffic a bit quicker, if he could have qualified a bit better, you get the feeling his position at the end of the day might have been a bit better too.
So it must be so frustrating just sitting there behind that 26 car there for the number 911 of Nathaniel Simpson, trying to get past the BMW of Nick Daly. The thing with that BMW, though, is it really boogies. It's got some great mid-range punch with that turbocharged motor, whereas the Porsche really makes its lap time up on the braking. It's a very stable car. But where do you make that big braking manoeuvre? I guess the greatest braking zone, I presume, is into Brundles. That's where you see a lot of moves attempted through.
Yeah, but I find the problem sometimes with overtaking around here is that is probably the biggest braking zone, because the only other straight is ended with a fast right-hander at Richards. That's not really a really big standing on the brakes moment. It is down here, but I do find that the left-handed part at Brundle before the actual tighter part at Nelson does make it a bit more difficult to actually go through, because if you're not absolutely alongside at the braking zone, then you are in trouble in terms of making a dive. You can't have any lunges through there. Oh, as that was close. Slightly got slight contact between Simpson and one of the GT4s there, Alistair Pollock in the 21 Mercedes, who flashes the lights, a bit delayed for good measure. It's just a bit of disruption really through Brundle, and then the chance is really gone at Nelson. I feel like if it was just a right-angled corner, admittedly it would be a bit more boring and a lot less challenging, but it might provide a better overtaking opportunity than what they've got at the moment at Snetterton, which it can be a difficult place to overtake, as Nathaniel Simpson has found today.
Yeah, it's just not quite clicked today, has it, for him, for Nathaniel Simpson. Yeah, we've got a bit of a Kieran Sharp just really getting into the groove at the front of the GT4 field. That gap now up to 13 seconds. So even with that slightly shorter pit stop, he's still been able to build that gap up, and hopefully he'll be okay on fuel. That's the only concern I have with a 5 seconds shorter pit stop than everyone else. You do worry slightly, but I'm sure it's under control.
Yeah. You would hope so. Over a race of this distance, you shouldn't see a second pit stop. It should be the one that we've seen already, and that would be it. We're not fuel limited all race long in this series, just off of the start of the race, as you can see with the length of the pit stops that we've already seen. Now, Matthew Crisp has been making a lot of moves today, and it looks like he might be about to make another. Richard Jepp, it may well be his latest victim, as he goes down the inside into the Montreal hairpin and through into what will be 4th place overall, but 3rd and onto the podium, more importantly in the Pro class. So, excuse me, 2nd place in the Pro class. He's already on the podium in there. Oliver Etchard, of course, is 2nd place in the AMS, but that's a great pass and a great race so far from Matthew Crisp, because it wasn't that long ago he was overtaking Simner, who he's now put 3.5-4 seconds in the rearview mirror.
Feeling that is just seeing your rival just turn into a speck in the mirror. Always nice. A pretty vivid impression there. Richard Jepp, our rolling cameraman, with one of the GT3 Ferraris coming through, just shows you how in certain parts of the circuit, certain parts of the corner, you're just not able to generate the same speed. And the mistake there from Matthew Crisp, and Jepp just says thank you very much, gasses it up though, but can Crisp hang on under the brakes? No, the Porsche slips around the nose and takes the position up into 3rd place. What a move.
Fantastic from Richard Jepp ahead of Matthew Crisp, who'll be really ruining that error, because it's effectively meant that after a great pass and a pretty decisive one back at turn 2, he's got to do it all over again. Now, he's been here before. He was down the inside of Richard Simner into the final corner. He's decided not to attempt that on his teammate. Jepp seemed to be keeping the car slightly further to the left through Coram than you would otherwise see. Maybe in fear of that, they might be in contact and just telling one another what's going on, especially with the behaviour of that car. That was a late turn-in for Richard Jepp, enforced by a GT3 diving down the inside at Richards. And here we go again, round 2. Matthew Crisp, so late on the brakes, parks it on the apex. Have a look at that for an overtaking textbook. Matthew Crisp is up to 3rd position. He did everything right there.
Yeah, fantastic way to just retaliate and get back up on top there. Great stuff from Matthew Crisp. Just made a slight, it was only an ever so slight mistake on the previous lap that allowed Richard Jepp in there, but you can see that little nimble little Porsche just able to turn that a little bit tighter than the big Mercedes. Really intriguing battle. Just shows you how good a category GT4 can be, so close to their road-going counterparts. They run a very, very similar spec of engine and the same gearbox. It's the road gearbox that runs in GT4. So, and I believe the Porsche, actually, you can get it serviced at a Porsche dealer. You don't actually have to send it back to Weissach and Flach to Porsche Motorsport. It can be done just like the road-going version.
Wow, yeah, it is a bit closer to the actual road-going version, which was always the argument made about GT3, wasn't it, about 10 years ago, when it was in its further infancy than it is now. As we get side by side again here, Jepp getting alongside through Bombhole now and towards Coram, who'll be looking for his way through, but can't. That was always the argument made about the GT3s, but it really is the GT4s that are a lot closer to their road-going counterparts. I've got to say, they seem to be getting more popular as well in the real world, maybe in sim racing as well, and they're providing great racing here too. Matthew Crisp is remaining on the inside here, and I've got to say that's, for the second time in a row, another mistake that's presented a chance to Richard Jepp to go back through. Round the outside, he'll go through turn one. There's no room through there, and Crisp dives it in very deep to prevent him from having a chance anyway. Now Jepp will look to the inside and know he's later on the brakes anyway, is Matthew Crisp. It was aggressive defending, but he won't want to make the overtake for a third time.
So 32 minutes to go. How long is this battle going to rage on for? I reckon all the way to the checkered flag. As Remy Gilbert at the front of the field has steadied the ship. 4.2 seconds now the gap is back up to. So Gal Valero's early charge on new tyres seems to have fizzled out a touch. He's very much safe in second place from Luciano Whitfoot, who he remembered them when they came into the pits about half an hour ago. They were right together, but Valero's definitely put Whitfoot firmly under control. So in a comfortable second, but it'll be frustrating for that gap not to keep coming down to Gilbert. Yeah, it will. As we get past one of the lapped GT4s now, that's Stephen Koenig, who is without his teammate Janeman Preuss, unfortunately, on this occasion. The pair of South Africans actually made contact at Silverstone. I hope they're still on good terms. But it was Copse Corner where they clashed, and only half of them have made it to this race, unfortunately. But Stephen Koenig, they've been put a lap down in GT4, as Matthew Crisp can't quite seem to shake Richard Jepp with the quickness and speed that he overtook him on 2 occasions. Maybe now he has, as he gets Coram and the final corner right on this occasion. I think Richard Jepp will now have to resign himself to 3rd position in the GT4 Pro category, as one of the GT3s gets down the inside and further disrupts his teammate, actually, there. That's Tom Weston down the inside of Richard Jepp. Now we'll do the same to Crisp and we'll disadvantage him almost as much. So it's all swings and roundabout. It gives and takes. And Matthew Crisp should now hang on to that overall podium that he's fought so hard for. Don't write off Richard Jepp. He's right there, keeping that pressure on, and that was it. How he got past in the first place was just a little mistake from Crisp. So Jepp just got to try and be irritating, be like a little wasp, just bugging Matthew Crisp, and hope for that little error, because it just seems like Crisp's able to place the Mercedes in the right positions to not allow Jepp an opportunity to overtake. So it's going to have to require pressure from Jepp and the Porsche to force a mistake. Yeah, just want to return to a point that I was making a couple of moments ago, although they keep seeming to battle whenever I try to say a longer sentence, which is just great. But we'll leave them to it for the moment in this fight for 3rd place. We're talking about the road-going nature of these GT4 cars, and they really are. I was watching a little bit of a clip earlier on from a race at Spa in GT4. There were absolutely millions of GT4 cars, almost as many cars as there were GT3s in the
24 Hours of Spa, which I think was being held at the same weekend as the clip I was watching at the time. It's become a very, very popular category from sort of a secondary to GT3. You can almost see it overtaking GT3 in terms of numbers because it's slightly slower, maybe a little bit more friendly for those who don't quite want the speed of GT3, which is only going up and up. You'd imagine slightly cheaper as well as a result, and they're getting some fantastic fields now in the real world in this category, and it feels like the addition to sim racing now, or at least the addition to iRacing, which it was lacking for a while, is here properly, and it's a great class on this service now.
Yeah, superb class, and yeah, so many different options of car to choose from. Oh dear, that was clumsy, really clumsy. And for the GT4 McLaren there, where do you go?
Well, it's Stephen Koenig, who is waiting anyway. It's Nathaniel Simpson, who's got himself in a real awkward place where he can't really go backwards or forwards now. He's going to try and get backwards and then turn himself around without damaging the nose. He's just about managed it, but that was an awkward moment. Koenig doesn't end up waiting, but you're right. I think that is the only question that can be asked in this situation. If you're a GT4 driver, they can't just disappear.
Definitely not. So, what a pity. So there you go. The Stephen Koenig's in the McLaren. He's giving loads of room, still loads of room, just going about his business. That's just really poor awareness from Nathaniel Simpson there.
And it's not exactly like as we're side by side again here for third. These two will not leave each other alone as Richard Jepp gets down the inside, tries to again. It's almost like watching a replay of a couple of laps ago, but it wasn't like Simpson wouldn't have seen Koenig still at the rear quarter maybe. Koenig was actually ahead at the apex on the outside there. Now, obviously that doesn't mean that it doesn't really mean a lot, but it does mean that you have to give space if you're in Simpson's position there, and he really didn't. So that was surprising, to be honest, but Simpson's the one who pays the price.
Yep, that's, well, there's no mistake there for me. Meanwhile, this battle is just fantastic for the last spot on the podium between Matthew Crisp and Richard Jepp's Porsche, and it might be about to be split up as they're going to have to be careful here as the BMW just trying to force a move down there. The 26 machine, the M4 of Nick Dealey in the AM Clash and GT3 does finally get through, and luckily doesn't split up this great GT4 battling we're enjoying.
Not quite, although it's given Matthew Crisp a bit of a problem into Agostini here, but Richard Jepp is too far away to make the move, almost pushing him around the corner. Well, that was very close around the hairpin on that occasion, and it does mean that we're into the thick of it with GT3 traffic again, although as I mentioned it earlier on, it's not really coming in waves anymore. It's just a constant for these GT4s to navigate. At the moment, I can't quite figure out why Matthew Crisp can't get away here from the Porsche. He was clearly quicker when he was behind. He has to make the overtake twice, but did so convincingly both times. Now he's under pressure.
Yeah, it was just a great ding-dong battle between these two. And the thing is, they're quite a long way back from Oliver Ettridge in second, so they're not as if they're compromising too much. They can go at it. They can go at it pretty hard, and they've got a good gap back to Nathan Tagg in the in 6th place. So yeah, excuse me, they've got a couple of seconds back to Richard Simner. Now that is a question: could Richard Simner? Oh that
no!
Ruins it. There we go.
Well, that is the end of it, I'm afraid. It's the Ferrari of Nuno Costa who was down the inside. Big contact with Richard Jepp, who is off the road. Nathan Tagg will also go through, as well as Richard Simner, who's now on to the GT4 Pro podium. But it's another case, I'm afraid, where the GT4 blameless in that one. I think there was space, and I think Costa was okay to try to make the move, but he was clearly in too deep.
Yeah, that was daft. Really daft. And Nick steals away a good battle. That's a pity. However, Richard Simner in the 42 car, the teammate of Richard Jepp, can mount a challenge. He's only about just over 2.5 seconds back on Matthew Crisp. So there's an opportunity, if he can really get his head down in the next 20 minutes or so, he could have a go at the podium.
We'll see if we get to that point as we have a look at a replay now as to what happened. I'd say Costa was within his rights to go for this, but it was... Oh, just even really missed the apex there. I'm not sure. Difficult one to call, actually, having seen it from that angle. He didn't exactly go spearing into the side of the GT4 like we saw earlier on. It's certainly not as obvious as some of the others that we've seen today. I mean, Matthew Crisp's overtake, for example, on Richard Simler was a more obvious violation of the rules, in my opinion, than that one, which suggested, from the aerial view at least, that they were actually quite level and Costa wasn't flying in there at all.
Not sure. Again, who would want to be a race steward trying to dissect all of this? That's one of the challenges, really, of multi-class sports car racing, is that coexistence. And that's where the true greats are just so good at that. How they can get through, if they're in a faster class, get through traffic without losing time, or indeed if you're being passed, to not lose time as the faster cars come through. The gap at the front is just wedged, it's just cemented at just over 4 seconds, has been for several laps, and Remy Gilbert is just managing this gap so well. No matter what Gael Valero does, he just can't seem to knock that gap down.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak too soon, of course, but if Gilbert wins this race, then he'll be pretty much level with Valero going into the last 2 rounds of the championship. It's a very short championship, of course, but you get the feeling it could be between those two. Seem to be the class of the field, although Luciano Vippert has put in a couple of good performances as well to be up there in the field. He was 5th 2 weeks ago. He is on the podium as things stand right now. I mean, it's, oh dear, has he got a Porsche around? It is Jordan Pierce, who's trying to recover from an incident at the very same corner, and he goes around on this occasion too. But it's going to be a good fight between those two, and after Silverstone, I suspected Valero would walk away with the championship, possibly by winning all the races, but clearly it's going to be more complicated than that with Remy Gilbert on the field.
Yeah, will be. You can. There's no equal opportunities, is there? Just always challenging to make the way through. Let's have a look then. Jordan Pierce. Oh dear. Again, just a little bit clumsy. Just trying to force a move that's just not there.
Yeah, it is. I think because Jordan Pierce assumed they were 2 wide and not 3. I think Simpson went a little bit wider than he was expecting. The GT4 cut underneath him to try and alleviate that, and Jordan Pierce was swiped across to go around for a spin, and that was a real shame in the end for him. I mean, it's been a decent recovery. Fair play to him for continuing on in the race, because plenty of drivers did not in this one. We've still only at the 3 retirements, actually, which is pretty good going. But it's been a good recovery for Jordan Pierce, who's been a lap down all day long. And I reckon he's still got enough time with 20 minutes to go to catch the 7 seconds required to maybe get back to Nathaniel Simpson again.
So if he wants to do it, need to get a move on with 20 minutes to go of this 90-minute race. Really heading into the business end of the race, and also who's got the tyre left. Remember, we've been running for about 40 minutes, full tank and new set of tyres from there, and are the tyres now starting to get a bit tired? I don't think it's a hugely tyre heavy circuit. There are a few corners, like for example turn 1 here going around Rich's. He could put the left-hand side of the tyre under a little bit of stress, and maybe Coram, but in general not too bad. What's going on here?
What is going on here? 2 cars getting locked together, it seems. Nick Scott and Adam Locke there were locked together, interestingly, and there's a flash of the lights, a furious one from Adam Locke there. Nick Scott has already got damage again, I'm afraid, in this race. He's used his fast repair after the incident with Marco Silva earlier on in the day. Is he back in the race, Marco Silva? He is indeed. He's 5 laps down on the next, or 4 laps down, excuse me, on the next GT3, but at least still back in the race. Nick Scott used his fast repair and got back in a lot quicker, but that was defending from Adam Locke. Now, I'm not sure whether he couldn't turn any more than that because the cars were actually making contact and he couldn't do it anymore, or whether he was just opening the steering there and putting Locke into the grass, but it would be exceptionally bizarre if he was.
Yes, it would. It's a little bit too much, disagreement going on there between several cars out on circuit. And they're going to have to the Ferrari getting in very deep there. The 555 machine there of Adam Locke. And this isn't over.
No. Oh, here we go. That was a big slide on the way in from the Porsche. And the Ferrari there of Adam Locke had to get on the brakes to not assist him in going around. Any sort of a push there would have been enough to send him spinning again and again and again. And now it looks like the writing could be on the wall now for the driver of the Porsche. Here he goes to... Oh, Adam Locke tries to go to the inside, then the outside, then the inside again. And the outside. Nick Scott blocking him all the way. Adam Locke now gets to the inside. He's going to be blocked off here if he can. Scott also defending at turn 2. Now Adam Locke will head around the outside again. And we're like watching a replay. What is going on here? Nick Scott there on the inside line, forcing Adam Locke into the grass.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear.
Well,
I think both of them might be getting called into the steers just to have their heads banged together. So you're both getting a penalty, because that's ridiculous.
Maybe. There was a lot of blocking going on the front straight there from Nick Scott, and it was Adam Locke trying to work his way through the inside, outside, and inside again. It didn't work, and it will always be a struggle for it to work if there's defending like that, but surely that's not going to be judged to be within the rules. This battle for 17th place could turn quite ugly, and I'm afraid it's not the first time Nick Scott's been involved in a battle like this by the sounds of it.
No. My worry is that when does this end? You know, 17 minutes with them quite close together on track. I mean, if you look at the pace-wise, 555, Adam Locke's best lap is a 147.989, Nick Scott a 148.4. So you could argue that Adam Locke has a touch more pace, and well, I think that Nick Scott going a little bit beyond the limit to defend, and I think Adam Locke's going beyond the limit to attack. It's just all a bit messy, isn't it?
Well, what's going to happen here? Adam Locke is certainly quicker, but whether he's going to find his way through again is another mystery. There's the defence from Scott. Locke gets back to the racing line, and Scott does protect the inside line on the way into turn 1 here, but it does ruin his exit a bit. So here we go again. Are we going to see another replay? Locke doesn't even try and go around the outside this time. What is he going to do instead? Well, I think he's just going to elect to not overtake on this occasion. There's still 16 minutes to go. There's a long time for him to make this move, but unfortunately for him, he would have been hoping for at least 16th in today's race and a couple of more AM positions, which are up for grabs up ahead of him. But now with a 6 and 7 second margin up to Dan Ciotti ahead of this battle, he's fast running out of time to make this overtake and then catch and then do another overtake in the final quarter of an hour.
So, gap at the front all of a sudden has jumped up again. 6.4 seconds now after being wedged in at 4 seconds for so long between Remy Gilbert and Gael Valero. 6.5 seconds. I do wonder, Ewan, if Valero's just decided just to back off and accept second and make it to the finish.
This could be a fairly inconsequential pass pretty soon. Richard Jett on the recovery drive after having contact with one of the GT3s at the final corner. Back down the inside of Nathan Tighe here. They are in different classes, of course, so Jett in the pro car on the right-hand side and Tighe in the AM, although around the outside goes Tighe, and he will remain 5th place. Again, another one of these awkward positions, but I think an inconsequential battle in the end. No points up for grabs here, and too little time remaining for Richard Jett also to cross the margin necessary for him to get a podium today.
So the battle continues then, between our fingers here, between the 25 of Nick Scott in the Porsche and the 555 of Adam Locke in the Ferrari there. They managed to get around Montreal without bringing each other to almost to a halt, so that's an improvement. Well done, chaps.
Stephen Koenig, the latest of them to be overtaken here. It's benefited Nick Scott a little bit more than it did Adam Locke there, who needed to just use a bit of correction there to just bring his car back on course again after a bit of a slide through turn 3. Now into the fast left-hander. Oh, there's a car going slowly here. Don't know what that was all about, but Nick Scott has been able to jump past him. Has to go on the defensive at the next corner, though. This is the exit of Oggies now. It's a bit of a curved exit to this corner, not quite a straight one that you can really gain from. That sets you up for the right-hander at Williams, and then the Bentley straight, where I would argue Adam Locke is probably not close enough to be making a move this time.
No, but he's definitely got I think he's got a touch more pace. You can see Scott going very defensive into each corner, just trying to make sure he's parking that Porsche as best as possible to not give Locke an opportunity. But if you keep doing that, then you are just going to lose time. You're not going to be running the optimal racing line. So coming around Coram now, pretty evenly matched there, but Locke just getting closer. And if you can get a good exit here out of Murray's, no, Adam Scott though. Adam Scott, that's the golfer. Scott. He gets out of that final corner very well.
A bit of a name crash here. Adam Scott and Nick Locke. I don't know. Anyway, that
was what got me. That was good. That was what got me confused. Not the tall, very talented Australian golfer.
Well, yeah. We're just getting flashbacks now. Every time there's going to be a car on the outside at turn 2. I do wonder, and this is not a great thing really, because someone shouldn't be able to just intimidate someone else from being able to make a move, but it feels like since those 2 incidents, Adam Locke has been a bit intimidated here, and he's not really gone alongside Nick Scott since.
I think that's a great point. I think he's just thinking, do I just wait for an error here that is likely to come, or do I just try and set up a perfect draft move? But yeah, definitely I think once bitten, twice shy is Adam Locke here, and I think just trying to be as menacing as possible in the mirrors. And well, the front of that Ferrari is a menacing looking beast.
It is, and you would expect it to be taking advantage of the fairly weary looking front end of this Porsche. I'm sure you've noticed at home the damage that Nick Scott has got to the sort of front right. You can see a bit more of that tyre than you should be able to on that front-on shot. That's view on the Bentley straight is a good example of that, and so he's clearly grappling with some form of damage here too, and he takes a wide line into Coram. That's probably a good idea to protect the inside line at the final corner. Not that I think there's going to be a dive from Locke there anyway. Get it comfortably slowed up in time and then get the run onto the front straight here. And with 10 minutes to go, Adam Locke is going to still try and find his way through, but getting to the point with this battle now where I'm wondering whether he's even going to bother, because he might bank on there being a penalty post-race and getting the position at the end anyway. Ever since those 2 incidents, he's not been alongside. Maybe that's the reason.
Well, 10.5 minutes to go. It's going to be a long 10.5 minutes for the 25 of Nick Scott, and probably not long enough for the 555 Ferrari of Adam Locke. He'll just be desperate saying, come on, make an error.
Yeah, just try and stop me from having to make this move would be ideal, if you could. It's not happened for now. Out through the middle of the circuit again. The Grand Prix layout, the Snetterton 300 layout we're using here today, of course, just adding quite considerable length to what was otherwise a relatively short circuit by modern standards. And now we make our way out onto the back straight, which has always been here towards, as we've described before, one of those difficult braking zones in all of the UK, actually, as you turn left around here. And I know these guys have got ABS to get slowed up in time for the right-hander at Nelson, but that doesn't diminish the challenge that you get around and under the bridge there. Better line through bomb hole from Adam Locke. Trails the Porsche very closely around Coram here, but where do you go? You look to the inside, do you look for the run on the exit? Well, unfortunately, he hasn't really got either there. Didn't quite get wide on the way in and the exit that was required to have a move into turn one as he's done in laps gone by.
Nothing wrong with a straight line grunt of that Porsche, isn't there? It just gets out the corner so well out of Murray's, and then even in the mid-range pretty good too. Wonder if maybe the 25 of Nick Scott's running a little bit. Of course, we're on fixed setup, aren't we? Scratch that. Nick Scott just seems, whatever the way that Porsche is configured, just seems to have the straight line edge over the Ferrari.
And even with the aerodynamic damage, well, we don't know it's aerodynamic damage, but it's certainly visual. I would have thought. I would have thought that Porsche would be experiencing front or straight line speed woes if either of them were to. As oh my goodness, one of the GT4s goes for a big slide in front of them, and that could have ended in catastrophe for everybody. Thankfully, it sort of got out the way accidentally on the exit of Agostini there, and the two GT3s can breathe a sigh of relief there that they weren't involved in a pileup.
That was Richard Jepp, who was previously fighting for the podium and got struck by a GT3 car. He's now down. He only lost a couple of positions with that, but he's now down in 7th. So, yeah, just it's all going a bit to pieces for Richard Jepp, unfortunately. He's got to try and just get it to the finish and get the points in the bag. Oh, a little bit of a split there in traffic, the 32. Aston in the Falcon colours there. Just making it a little bit difficult there, and it just doesn't work out for Adam Locke, and now he's got it all to do all over again.
Yeah, that could be that. In GT3 AM, by the way, we haven't really talked about the leader at all. Don't think we've mentioned his name once. Gianluca Elliott is leading by over 20 seconds again. It was a fairly dominant display at Silverstone 2 weeks ago. He looks like he's on his way to a second win in just 2 rounds. That, of course, we're not going to see a repeat winner in GT3 Pro. Looks like Gao Valero is going to come up short on this occasion, and that gap only increasing now to Remy Gilbert, who is leading by quite some distance. Then in GT4 Pro, we're going to get a repeat winner too, along with Oliver Ettridge, who's going to be a repeat winner in GT4 AM. So a remarkable start as things stand, of course, with over 5 minutes to go. Don't count your chickens, etc. But nevertheless, that's quite a remarkable record, really, that the lowest a race winner from 2 weeks ago has finished in the second round of this championship is second place. That's a remarkable record from 4 categories, and you don't see that very often. So a great record for those 4 drivers, and we'll wonder what that means for the remainder of the season. Spa up next, of course, in a couple of weeks' time on the first early part of April. Second Wednesday in April we'll be there, and then towards the end of that month we'll be at the finale at Brands Hatch. Of the races remaining, I get the feeling that this race is going to be most like Brands Hatch, and the Spa race we see in 2 weeks' time is going to be most like Silverstone. I feel like there's 2 pretty defined categories of racetrack in this 4-round championship. It's very much one of 2 halves, although those 2 halves are split into quarters amongst each other, if you like. Adam Locke is looking for his way through again. Clearly he's not going for our theory of waiting in the wings, and he's going to try a move himself. Nick Scott looking for the outside move, or trying to shut out the outside move, I should say. Adam Locke with, I think, some reservations about having a go at turn 2 there, because he looked to the inside, he looked to the outside as well. He didn't go for it in the end. I feel like his desire to actually make the move on the circuit is really starting to wane here. And we might well be waiting for a post-race adjudication on this one now. Down on the brakes into Agostini. This could help. So, I think is Richard Simnett ahead of them. Now, one driver who has been off in the recent past, or been for a drive-through, in fact, that has disrupted them, is Richard Jepp. He's no longer in the conversation for podium places, I'm afraid. it's Mikey Pollard, actually, excuse me, not Richard Simner. No longer in the conversation for podium places, Richard Jett, but now down in 5th place in the race, actually. So that is a bit of a step back and a lot back for Richard Jett. We've also got that for Carl Chase in the AM class. He is now down to 5th place as well in there, 10th overall in GT4. So some incident limits being reached by the looks of things here. 2 drive-throughs in the last few moments. In fact, 3, because Adam Grepston in GT3 has had to come through as well with 4 minutes to go.
Add up those incident points. You get 1 incident point for breaking track limits, 2 for a spin, but the big one is 4 for heavy contact with another driver. And these two here, Nick Scott and Adam Locke, they might be getting close to it as well after some of their disagreements. And right behind them, you've got the 44 of Tom Weston, who is he running a? He's running a lap ahead, actually. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, he is. I had to do a bit of working out myself there for that one. There in the main part of your screen, the onboard from Adam Locke. Just always feels like you're such a planted, safe car when you're in the Ferrari. It's got such a low centre of gravity, so sleek and low to the ground, or I'd say low centre of gravity, that just feel very safe, especially through these high-speed corners. Just look at or feel the way that it crouches down through this left-hander, for example. Maybe that's not the best example. Lap traffic in the way, just ruining the run through Hamilton that time.
It can stop as well, really deep on the brakes there for Adam Locke. He's pushing hard. Yeah, from everyone I've spoke to who's driven this car, they say it's just fantastic. Remember speaking to Felipe Fernandez-Lazar, who won the Nürburgring 24-hour with the Fricadelli team with this car, and he said, honestly, he says it's like, chassis-wise, it's like driving an LMP3 car. He says that's how good the handling is. It's like a Le Mans prototype, but with a GT engine in it, basically.
And it also sort of looks like a prototype in some ways as well. It's
yeah,
sort of...
It is, yeah.
We were speaking earlier about GT4 looking road going. I mean, incidentally, I have seen the road going version of this on the street just on a random day. But that's a bizarre story. It looks like a prototype in this GT3 specification. And the way that this is not a thing that we have to worry about in iRacing, of course, but for real life, the way it removes bodywork even is prototype-esque. It's remarkable.
Oh, huge modular pieces, both at the front and the rear, which make it such a serviceable car as well. And it's a all Ferrari development and design, but it's actually constructed by Orica, who know a thing or two about making prototype race cars. So yeah, I think it's gonna have a long and illustrious career. Took Ferrari's first ever Nürburgring 24-hour triumph. It's got a GTD Pro win at Daytona, and it's just clicking off the triumphs at the world's major endurance races, and you wouldn't bet against them doing the same at Le Mans in June. No, absolutely. Maybe they'll go for the double this year. That would be a spectacular result for them if they could manage that, or indeed any of the manufacturers, because there's a lot of manufacturers in the running for that this time around with the new regulations. But anyway, that's a entirely different tangent that we're about to go off on with about 45 seconds remaining. So we'll steer back on track again, because we are getting to the final moments of this race. Remy Guiraben might well be on his last lap, actually, today. He is nearly 10 seconds now ahead of Gaio Valero, as the fight for podium places isn't done yet. Second and third in GT4 Pro is going to be argued about for at least one more lap by Matthew Crisp and Richard Simner, who's caught him now. So Simner and Chris, they're still battling over that last spot in the podium. So great job from Simner to run that gap down, and now they'll get one more lap. So this is Simner's opportunity. If he wants that podium, he's got to get past Matthew Crisp.
Well, the time ticks away, and it has now elapsed. Over the line they'll go, but they will get another lap, of course. In the background, it looks like Remy Guiraben is going to take the win here at Snetterton. 90 minutes of racing, and they've belonged all to him. 9.7 seconds the margin at the end. A dominant display from our GT3 Pro winner tonight.
Absolutely flawless. Totally flawless there from Remy Gilbert. And when Gael Valero run down the gap to just around 3 seconds, he didn't panic and he just stuck to his pace and got it through. Oh dear, Crisp's been off.
He has. Now, this is out of the Montreal hairpin. Matthew, and there's weaving around going on here up ahead from one of the Mercedes. Is that a Mercedes that's involved? Richard Simner's not slowing down, so Matthew Crisp will likely not care, but what was going on there is unclear for the moment. Meanwhile, Gianluca Elliott has had a fantastic day so far. In fact, so quiet that we've not spoken about Elliott all day long. It was a race of battles, actually, at Silverstone for the driver of the 111 Porsche. While little of those battles were actually GT3 AM fights, it was still a heads-up day where he had to stay out of trouble. Well, he stayed out of trouble so well today, we've barely seen him. Not near anybody all day, but that is the route to success. GT3 AM winner Gianluca Elliott for the second round in a row, taking a double, as is Kieran Sharp, who will take the win in GT4 Pro. And then it will be Oliver Ettridge about a quarter of a minute afterwards to take another double win too. 3 double winners coming across the line in succession this season could well be dominated by a very few select amount of drivers.
So, and interestingly there, Nick Scott making it to the line, but Adam Locke nowhere to be seen. And oh dear, that was Simner getting into. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Okay, well,
oh dear.
That one's going to take some arguing about as well, I think. I fear.
Oh, lost it on his own, did Adam Locke.
So maybe that all of that will not matter. Oh dear, and he gets clattered as well on the way through. I have a feeling Richard Simner, by the way, will get in a bit of trouble for that. It was Louis Hesketh who can't avoid. I mean, he was in the middle of the road, Adam Locke, but he had just laid to a rest after his spin, so you can't really blame him very much. But Hesketh really didn't have anywhere to go in that one. So that's the end of an hour and a half of racing with 3 hours down, 3 hours to go in the Motorsport UK Asetek SimSports GT Challenge here in 2024. And it's been a series of double winners so far, apart from at the very front of the field. Remy Gilbert, the winner on the day, 9.6 seconds the final margin, with Luciano Vipper taking a good result in the podium places too. Ryan Ward was half a minute back with Keith Stewart, who was closing on him at the end but never really fought him. Jack Southfield was outside the top 5 at the end, and George Streetley was the final driver within a minute of the leader. Gianluca Elliott was the GT3 AM winner, ahead of Mike Barber and Tom Weston to round out the top 10. And then we get to those who were a lap down, Nick Dealey being one of them, along with Nuno Costa and Nathaniel Simpson. Those guys were all involved in fights for quite long periods today. Jordan Pierce recovered to 14th after his opening lap catastrophes. Adam Grevson was also a lap down with Nick Scott and Adam Locke. Then it was Dan Ciotti, Alistair Leckie, who were 2 laps down and at the very back of the field. We got Marco Silva, who got to the end, incidentally, in 20th place. And in the other GT3s were John McClune and Anthony Castles, who failed to finish. In GT4, it was a quarter of a minute between the 2 class winners. GT4 Pro won by Kieran Sharp and AM won by Oliver Ettridge. The runners-up come next, like Sir Richard Simner, who may get in trouble for his incident late on there with Matthew Crisp. Nathan Tighe was the first driver 1 lap down in the end, but will be on the podium in AM. Mikey Pollard and Richard Jepp separated at 2nd and 3rd in AM. Matt Cheverton taking that final podium spot. Alistair Pollock and Carl Chase were also 1 down. 11th position was James Smigersgale, who was another 45 seconds back in the end. Actually, Louis Hesketh clattered into Adam Locke on that last lap, but still finished 12th. Stephen Kernick got to the end along with Andy Chell. Daniel Thomas did not. He was the only retirement from GT4 today. Let's have a quick chat to some of the drivers, including Remy Gilbert now, who can join us now. Welcome in, Remy. Good to have you with us on what's a very good win for you. Nearly 10 seconds in the end. Did you have confidence after that opening round that you could pull off a performance like this, or was it a case of you really needed to steal back the momentum, if you like, in this championship after Gael Valero winning last week?
Well, I mean, I thought it was going to be close going into this round, but really didn't expect to have a half-second gap in quali and then just pretty much lead the whole race with a comfortable gap.
Yeah, I mean, what about the rest of the season now? Because I was expecting Valero to be very strong this season in terms of maybe winning most of the races, but now you've got one each. Is that going to be the story of the season? You sharing the spoils in terms of wins? What are you expecting?
Well, I think I've proved to everyone that that I can win, so I don't see why I can't do the same for the next 2 rounds.
Yeah, why not? We'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time at Spa. Thanks for chatting to us tonight, Remy, and congratulations on the win.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Remy Gilbert there, the winner in GT3 Pro. Second place was Gael Valero, who we can chat to now, runner-up on the day by 9.6 seconds. Welcome in, Gael. Good to have you with us again as well. Runner-up on this occasion, was this a bit of a surprise for you, or were you expecting a big challenge tonight?
No, absolutely not. I knew there's a reason I didn't buy Snetterton when it was not a free track, and yeah, if we can erase the entire track from the earth, that would be a nice thing.
Wow, that is brave words with so many British people about, but fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, how much driving experience did you have on this circuit then beforehand, and what sort of practice did you do beforehand, like maybe different to normal?
None. I had to learn the track basically. Yeah, well, anyway, I was missing something like driving ways, so wouldn't matter anyway. Yeah, so
I'm guessing you're more comfortable with Spa.
It's not even about the track at this point, so.
Okay, fair enough. Gael, thanks for chatting to us. Congratulations on second place here tonight, and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks at Spa.
See ya.
Thanks very much, Gael Valero there at second place tonight in GT3 Pro. Let's go to the other part of GT3. Johnny Elliott finishes in first in GT3 AM today. Welcome in, Johnny. Good to have you with us. Now, we didn't see a lot of you tonight, I've got to be honest, because you seem to have a quiet race from our perspective. Was that the case from yours?
Yeah, it was pretty quiet actually. Yeah, I can imagine that's what Max Verstappen feels sometimes. Not being big-headed, but yeah. But yeah, no, it was interesting. I mean, yeah, I sort of was just keeping the tyres within check, and I still had a bit of a battle behind. There was a pro driver, and he kept catching me up, and then I'm sort of trying to pull away a bit, and so I had some fun throughout the race.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, to be honest. I mean, is the rest of the season going to be like this for you? Are Spa and Brands Hatch particularly strong tracks for you?
Spa, I've not been to Spa for a while, and I think the times will be a lot closer there, being a bigger circuit, and well, limited time of practice. I mean, I've done quite a lot of driving at Snetterton recently, so that was quite easy to get into. And then Brands is a good track for me, so yeah, no, looking forward to that for both of those.
Right, we look forward to seeing you there. Johnny, thanks so much for chatting to us again, and congratulations on the win.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Johnny Elliott there, the winner in GT3 AM. Second was Tom Weston, who we did see a little more of, although not too much. Welcome in, Tom. Good to have you with the second place here tonight in GT3 AM. How was your race overall? We didn't see much of you either.
No, it was actually, apart from going for the traffic, it was actually really quiet. It was a very quiet race. I wasn't expecting that, to be quite honest, after practice this week. So yeah, I'm super happy with that.
What was practice like for you this week? Gael Valero just came in to tell us that he hates Snetterton and wants it to be removed from the earth. Were you a bit more complimentary of it, maybe?
About an hour before the start of the race, I was exactly the same. And then it just settled down a little bit. I've never raced here before. I've never even practiced here before. I've owned the track for so long, but I've never turned any laps here, and yeah, everybody just tells me it's horrible, but it wasn't too bad. The racing was good, so I'm happy.
A lot of Snetterton slander going on today, but there we go. That's what we get, I suppose. Congratulations on second place tonight, Tom, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, take care. Thanks for the broadcast, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we certainly will. Thanks so much, Tom Weston, second place in GT3 AM today. Let's go to the GT4s, where Kieran Sharp has taken the overall and pro wins. Welcome again, Kieran. Second win on the bounce for you on this occasion. It was the pit stop that I really noticed that was shorter for you than the rest of the field. Is there any really reason for that you had a 5 second shorter one and it still seemed absolutely fine for fuel at the end?
Not totally sure. felt like I wasn't going to get him because I was a bit far back at the start. But then, I was just trying to save as much fuel in that first part, and I had to be careful of how much fuel I put in, because obviously my calculations going off my really big fuel saving laps, and I didn't want to then under fuel, so it was a bit of a guess. But I was surprised to jump in the pits.
What do you expect from the rest of the season now? Because the driver who was run up to you 2 weeks ago, Daniel Thomas, wasn't in the running here today, but some of the familiar names were. Are you fearing the last couple of rounds in terms of the championship and holding on, or are you confident about Spa and Brands Hatch?
I have to say, I think the Aston weren't as quick as last week, Silverstone, and I have to see. I think Spa might be okay at Brands, though maybe not so. And other people are starting to get on top of their cars as well, so it'll be interesting to see. I've just got to keep it clean to the end.
It certainly will be interesting. Congratulations on the win tonight, Kieran, and thanks for chatting to us as well.
Thanks, thanks to you guys as well.
Thanks very much, Kieran Sharp there, the winner in GT4 Pro today. Richard Simner ended up in second position there, but there was, of course, a little bit of a last lap kerfuffle, I'll describe it as, between yourself, Richard, and, of course, Matthew Crisp, who you were fighting with at the end there. Just tell us about that incident from your perspective, maybe the last 5 laps or so, because I've got to say, I was surprised you even caught him at the end.
Yeah, no, I did long race of tyre preservation, I think, just so I could have some good pace at the end, and it worked out for me. I was catching, and I took an opportunity, and he shut the door, and it spun him round. I mean, to be fair, I was trying to right him a little bit to try to get him on his way again, but it wasn't working, so I just let him sort of drive to the side, and then I gave him the place back before the end of the lap, and I gather he obviously went over the X limit and got a black flag. But I mean, to be fair, he was panel bagging the whole way through the race. If he'd have not done that, he would have got the place and kept it. But these things happen. It was a good race. I gather people don't like the track, but I quite like it. So it's all right.
Yeah, well, I do as well, but I'm not driving either, so there you go. What do I know? You mentioned there about the incident limit that did befall Matt at the end. I mean, just how strenuous was that? Because he wasn't the only one. There were 3 drive-throughs on 1 lap at a stage in the final 10 minutes there across both classes, but people hitting the incident limit.
No offense to anybody else, but I was nowhere near it. So it's at the end of the day, you drive to the limits of a track, and you've got to keep an eye not just in front of you but behind you, especially with some of these GT3s. They're ridiculous. But at the end of the day, if he got himself that close to the incident limit, I can't really be blamed for his black flag. I can be blamed for spinning him round, sure, absolutely. And for that I apologise, and I gave him the place back, and what else can I do at that point?
Well, yeah, pretty resounding answer there, but that's fine. Congratulations, Richard, on what will be a podium at the end of the day, and thanks very much for chatting to us as well.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard Simner there, the second place driver in GT4 Pro. One last driver to have a chat with, and it's the GT4 AM winner, Oliver Ettridge. At second place overall in GT as well. Oliver, are you surprising yourself with some of the overall positions, because you're winning in some quite high places in terms of GT4 overall?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely did not expect P2 overall coming into this week. I'd have been happy with just sort of top 6, top 7. I think I've not had a look, but I'm assuming it was because there was a fair few incidents behind me.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't the most sort of incident-filled race in the world by any means, but maybe there was 1 or 2. What are you expecting from the last couple of rounds? So far, you've not been challenged so much for the lead of the class. Are you expecting more of a challenge in the final 2?
Yeah, definitely. I think Nathan, I race against him in the Pereira Cup, and he's definitely a match, if not slightly quicker there. So I think if he gets a bit of luck one week, then he's definitely going to be right with me.
Yeah, you never know. Congratulations, Oliver, on the win tonight, though, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Oliver Etcher's there, the winner in GT4 AM. And that just about does it for our coverage tonight of the third round in the Asetek SimSports GT Challenge. There's the second round, excuse me. The third round, which what I was thinking about, is coming up in 2 weeks' time. That's it, Spa-Francorchamps, for our only overseas trip. And Peter Mackay, it's going to be an interesting overseas trip to a very different location to what we have bookending that trip.
Well, I think we might see the drivers more swooning over the track rather than perhaps disliking it, because Spa is well regarded as one of the finest driver circuits in the world, and I think might give a little bit more room to play with for our multi-class traffic as well. So certainly no excuses next time we go racing.
Absolutely not, and no excuses not to join us either. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time again on RaceSpotTV. Thanks so much for your company. Again, it's Remy Gilbert who is the winner on this occasion in an increasingly interesting battle at the front of the Asetek SimSports GT Challenge. I've been Neil O'Leary alongside Peter Mackay. Hugo Luis Carmen has been the producer for us here tonight. Thanks to everyone who has tuned in. Until we see you in a couple of weeks' time over in Belgium at Spa-Francorchamps, it's goodbye for now.